It was a seemingly ordinary night in Corpus Christi, Texas, until a routine traffic stop on a quiet roadway erupted into a high-speed police chase that would end in irreversible tragedy. Red and blue lights tore through the darkness as officers pursued a fleeing vehicle across Nueces County, racing to stop what was quickly spiraling out of control. Within moments, spike strips were laid across the road in a desperate attempt to end the chase. Instead, the night ended with the death of Lieutenant Stuart Alexander, a veteran police officer who never made it home, and the arrest of a young man named Daniel Lee Lopez. But what happened on that highway was only the beginning of a far more disturbing story. In the courtroom that followed, Daniel Lee Lopez did something almost unheard of in death penalty cases. He refused to fight for his life. He asked judges to halt his appeals, rejected efforts to save him, and demanded that the state carry out his execution. Not out of confusion or coercion, but by choice. What kind of man looks at death row and decides there is no escape worth taking? Stay tuned, because tonight, we will uncover the full details of this story that stunned all of Texas. But first, subscribe to this channel and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss this and more gripping true crime stories. Born on September 15, 1987, in Corpus Christi, Texas, Daniel Lee Lopez grew up in a modest home where the rhythms of everyday life were familiar to everyone around him. School, church, weekend family meals, football games under Friday night lights. Friends and relatives remember a boy who could be both charming and troubled. Someone who could laugh easily one moment and retreat into silence the next, like a storm gathering behind calm eyes. From a young age, neighbors said Daniel was quick to react, quick to run when scared, quick to argue when challenged, quick to make choices that left others confused. They describe him as impulsive, someone whose emotions often outpaced his judgment. Teachers spoke of a bright student with potential, yet one who struggled to stay focused in class. Classmates remembered a kid who was fun to be around, but whose temper sometimes flared unpredictably. These weren't dramatic headline-making behaviors, just patterns subtle enough that most adults chalked them up to teenage restlessness. By his late teens, those small ripples of instability had grown more noticeable. Unresolved conflicts, abrupt mood swings, and decisions that seemed rooted more in impulse than thought. People close to him sometimes wondered whether he was trying to escape something inside himself: fear, guilt, confusion, or merely reacting to the pressures of life around him. It was a calm evening in March 2009 on the highways of Corpus Christi, Texas. The sun had long set, leaving the streets cloaked in darkness, interrupted only by the occasional hum of passing vehicles. For law enforcement, it was a routine night of patrols and traffic stops, a familiar rhythm in a city where officers are trained for vigilance, yet rarely expected to face life-or-death decisions in an instant. For Daniel Lee Lopez, however, this ordinary night would turn into a high-speed catastrophe that would change the lives of many forever. The events began with what seemed like a routine traffic stop. Lopez's vehicle was flagged for a minor violation, a situation millions of drivers experience without consequence. But in a split-second decision, he fled, igniting a high-speed chase that raced through the streets of Corpus Christi. Sirens screamed, patrol lights flashed across the night, and the tense radio chatter of law enforcement filled the air with urgency. Officers attempted to stop Lopez's vehicle, deploying spike strips in an effort to slow him down and prevent tragedy, but the situation escalated quickly. During the pursuit, Lopez struck Lieutenant Stuart Alexander, a veteran police officer who was actively placing the spike strips on the road in an effort to protect both the public and his fellow officers. The impact was immediate and fatal. Time seemed to stop in that instant, leaving behind a haunting silence. Lieutenant Alexander was more than a uniform. He was a husband, a father, and a respected member of the Corpus Christi Police Department. Known for his steady guidance and mentorship of younger officers, his professionalism and dedication had saved countless lives over his career. The shock of his death rippled through the community. Families lit candles, left flowers, and shared stories of a man who had given his life to protect others. The police department was plunged into grief, forced to reconcile the loss of a colleague while continuing the work he had devoted his life to. The incident was not just a tragic accident on a highway, it was a devastating moment that impacted a city, a community, and the law enforcement officers who witnessed the chaos. That March night became forever etched into the memory of Corpus Christi, a haunting reminder of how quickly ordinary moments can spiral into irreversible tragedy. In the aftermath, Daniel Lee Lopez was quickly apprehended by law enforcement. The calm that returned to the streets could not erase the gravity of what had occurred. A city in mourning, a police department grieving, and a young man now facing the full weight of the law. Lopez was charged with capital murder, the most serious classification of homicide in Texas. In simple terms, capital murder applies when a murder is committed under specific circumstances, including the killing of a law enforcement officer during the course of their duties. Because Lieutenant Alexander had been actively performing his duty, the state argued that the crime met the statutory criteria for a capital offense, automatically making it eligible for the death penalty. During the trial, prosecutors painted a detailed picture of that night: a high-speed chase, a fleeing suspect aware of the danger he posed, and a law enforcement officer performing his duty to maintain public safety. They argued that Lopez's actions were not accidental, emphasizing the reckless disregard for human life and the irreplaceable loss of a veteran officer. Every fact and testimony was designed to show the jury the full severity of the crime, highlighting why the harshest punishment in the state was warranted. The defense, meanwhile, attempted to humanize Lopez, presenting evidence of his troubled past, mental health struggles, and impulsive behavior. They argued that while the death of Lieutenant Alexander was tragic, Lopez's decisions were a combination of youthful recklessness and psychological instability rather than cold-blooded intent. Despite their efforts, the courtroom atmosphere was tense and heavy, as family members of both the victim and the accused sat through the proceedings, watching the legal process unfold with raw emotion. After days of testimony, arguments, and deliberation, the jury reached its verdict. In 2010, Daniel Lee Lopez was found guilty of capital murder and sentenced to death. The courtroom was filled with a mix of grief, relief, and disbelief. The family of Lieutenant Alexander mourned the loss of a loved one, while Lopez's family grappled with the reality of a sentence that could not be reversed. The weight of the decision hung over everyone present, a reminder of the finality of the justice system and the profound consequences of one fateful night. Lopez's reaction was unexpected in its restraint. There was no celebration, no outburst, no attempt to deflect blame. Instead, there was only acceptance, a calm acknowledgement of the sentence handed down to him. He did not resist, argue, or appeal immediately. In that moment, the courtroom witnessed a rare turning point, a young man confronting the full consequences of his actions with a quiet resolve that left both supporters and critics stunned. The sentence marked the beginning of Lopez's journey on death row, a path that he would later choose to navigate in a way almost unheard of in capital cases. Once Daniel Lee Lopez was sentenced to death in 2010, the courtroom's gavel did more than finalize a verdict. It set the course for a journey that few would ever fully comprehend. Immediately after the sentence was handed down, Lopez was transferred to the Polunsky Unit in Livingston, Texas, the high-security prison reserved for the state's death row inmates. Polunsky is notorious for its extreme isolation. Inmates are confined to small, windowless cells for 23 hours a day, allowed only minimal contact with guards or other prisoners, and subjected to a strict daily routine designed to maintain order but not comfort. For Lopez, this stark and regimented environment became the backdrop for what would be one of the most extraordinary and controversial decisions in modern death penalty history. Unlike most condemned inmates who begin the lengthy process of appeals, motions, and procedural delays, often stretching for years, sometimes decades, Lopez made an astonishing request. Within months of arriving at Polunsky, he told the court that he did not want delays, he did not want appeals, and he demanded that his execution be carried out as quickly as possible. The legal world was stunned. Lawyers, judges, and prosecutors were forced to confront a decision that almost no inmate ever makes: a voluntary acceptance of death. His request immediately became the emotional and psychological core of this story, raising questions that blurred the lines between law, morality, and human psychology. His defense attorneys fought vigorously to protect his legal rights, fearing that Lopez might be acting impulsively, under psychological duress, or without fully understanding the consequences of his choice. They argued that no person should be allowed to abandon appeals without first ensuring their competency, and they pushed for comprehensive evaluations. In response, the courts ordered multiple mental health assessments, calling in psychologists and psychiatrists to evaluate his mental state. They studied every detail of his background: his upbringing, family relationships, past impulsivity, and emotional stability. Experts asked whether he was depressed, coerced, or unable to grasp the full magnitude of death. After weeks of examination, the court determined that Lopez was competent. He understood the finality of his request, the implications of refusing all appeals, and the irreversible nature of execution. This ruling confirmed what few could imagine: he was choosing this path consciously and voluntarily. The court acknowledged that Lopez fully comprehended his actions and was capable of making decisions about his own fate. Life at Polunsky intensified the psychological reality of this choice. The daily routine, long hours in isolation, the unchanging sounds of fluorescent lights and distant cell doors, the rigidly timed meals and limited outdoor exposure, forced Lopez into continual reflection. Each day was the same, yet each day became heavier, pressing him to confront the magnitude of his actions and the life he had taken. In letters and statements to his attorneys and spiritual advisors, Lopez expressed deep remorse for the death of Lieutenant Stuart Alexander and repeatedly emphasized a sense of personal responsibility. In every message he returned to a single haunting phrase, "I deserve this." Unlike almost all other death row inmates who fight every available avenue to delay or overturn their sentences, Lopez's decision to volunteer for execution placed him in an extraordinarily rare category. This concept, a prisoner actively choosing to embrace their sentence without delay, is almost unheard of, and it drew intense attention from legal scholars, psychologists, and the public alike. Observers struggled to reconcile the human desire for survival with the cold, deliberate acceptance of death that Lopez exhibited. For Lopez, the stark reality of Polunsky's confinement magnified this choice. Days and nights stretched endlessly, each hour reinforcing the inevitability of what he had demanded. There was no escape from the walls, no relief from the silence, no distraction from the passage of time. Every letter he wrote, every statement he made, was a testament to his acceptance of responsibility and the psychological toll of life on death row. The isolation, the routines, and the looming finality of the law became a crucible, forging a young man confronting the consequences of his actions in the most direct and uncompromising way possible. In the end, Lopez's story on death row became a study not only of crime and punishment but of the human psyche under extreme circumstances. His choice to forego appeals, to accept the sentence he had received, and to voluntarily face execution challenged assumptions about fear, guilt, and accountability. Polunsky's walls, the relentless routines, and the psychological weight of death row created the stage upon which he would navigate the final chapters of his life, a rare and unsettling journey that left a lasting impression on everyone who followed his case, and one that would ultimately lead to the inevitable confrontation with mortality that he had chosen to embrace. The final chapter of Daniel Lee Lopez's story unfolded on the evening of August 12, 2015, at the Huntsville Unit in Huntsville, Texas, the state facility where all Texas executions are carried out. Outside the prison walls, life continued as usual, but inside, time slowed to a somber, measured pace. Witnesses gathered quietly. Correctional officers moved with deliberate precision. The atmosphere was heavy, restrained, and saturated with the gravity of what was about to occur. Earlier that day, Lopez was offered a final meal. By that time, Texas had limited last meals to the standard prison menu, and Lopez ate what was provided that day, simple, routine, unremarkable, a small, stark reflection of the structured reality of life on death row. Even this ordinary act underscored the magnitude of the moment, the routine of a man awaiting the consequence he had long voluntarily chosen. Lopez was then escorted into the execution chamber at Huntsville, fully aware that this was the moment he had repeatedly requested the courts to allow. There were no last-minute appeals, no delays, no interventions. This was the conclusion he had accepted years earlier while housed at the Polunsky Unit, a path he had consciously chosen. The silence in the room carried the weight of that decision, the rare reality of a man who had stopped fighting to live. Before the procedure began, Lopez was offered the opportunity to speak. His voice was quiet and steady as he delivered his final statement, addressing both his family and the family of Lieutenant Stuart Alexander. He expressed his hope that the execution would bring some measure of peace to both families. He acknowledged the gravity of his actions, expressed deep sorrow for the pain he had caused, and spoke of walking the path set before him as best he could. He concluded with words of acceptance, love, and a hope for reconciliation beyond this life. "I hope this execution helps my family and also the victim's family. This was never meant to be, sure, beyond my power. I can only walk the path before me and make the best of it. I'm sorry for putting you all through this. I'm sorry. I love you. I am ready. May we all go to heaven." As the procedure unfolded, witnesses observed in solemn silence. There was no disruption, no dramatics, only the quiet finality of the process unfolding as designed. After several minutes, all movement ceased and the chamber remained still. At 6:31 p.m. Central Daylight Time, Daniel Lee Lopez was pronounced dead, approximately 15 minutes after the lethal injection began. A natural, reflective moment of silence followed. For the fallen officer, for the grieving families, and for a case that challenged the legal system with its rarity and moral complexity. With that pronouncement, the story reached its irreversible conclusion. Daniel Lee Lopez became one of the rare inmates in Texas history to volunteer for execution, closing a chapter defined by guilt, accountability, and an uncommon acceptance of consequence. The chamber doors opened, witnesses departed, and Huntsville returned to quiet, leaving behind a case that would continue to be studied, debated, and remembered long after the final words were spoken. If this story left you reflecting on justice, remorse, or the human mind under extreme circumstances, make sure to hit that like button to show your support. Share this video with friends who are fascinated by true crime, and subscribe to the channel for more gripping real-life stories that explore the darkest and most compelling corners of human behavior. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss our next investigation into the crimes, trials, and shocking truths that leave us questioning how far someone can go, and what justice really looks like.